Michael Delacour. I'm in Berkeley.
I'm Joe Liesner. I'm with Food Not Bombs, and I also part of the Omni.
I'm Lisa Teague. I'm from Berkeley. Well, not from Berkeley, but with People's Park. People's Park.
So all of our panelists today are part of People's Park Organizing Committee and are organizing to not let the city of Berkeley demolish or UC Berkeley demolish People's Park, which they're attempting again. But first I wanted to start with you, Mike, since you've been a part of the original People's Park struggle. What was your part in the struggle? How did it start for you, and what was your role in it?
I came here in '65. It was at the end of the free speech movement. The Vietnam Day Committee had started with a teach-in that took place in early '64. And the free speech movement sort of gave us the right to have free speech on campus. What it was is that students had gone south. When they came back, they tried to raise money on campus. They were haunted by the officials, the administration, weren't allowed to do that. And in a process of a year and a half, they won the right to have free speech at certain specific times on campus, like at Sprout Steps at 1, between 12 and 1, or in the same place between 5 and 7 in the evening. So, but that is just when school was going. So the things that you saw there somewhat were in the summertime, and where the citizens, or people, mostly non-students because the students had left town, had sort of taken on the role of free speech. Like the thing with Cameo, along with that, you had on campus about 60% of the windows had been broken out in all of the buildings. It was a very, very large struggle around, the most important thing, around three identities: us, the students, Black liberation, four identities, and the Chicanos, or the ethnic studies group of people. That was the ingredient that sort of made it all happen in '68. That added spreading the struggle. We got one more identity on our side, and they sort of lost control of us. So the thing with Cameo, that was all sort of a thing that was taking place around the anti-war movement. You know, you heard it all. So at the same time, we in the community, in the summertime, were holding these events at, not concerts necessarily, but more anti-war propaganda, or what we were saying, propaganda, at Martin Luther King, no, hold it. Constitution Square was called, now it's called Martin Luther Square, Park, downtown Berkeley. And what happened, we did that for 3 years straight in the summertime. Every weekend, we would bring out food, sort of this Food Not Bombs. We sort of started that by feeding people at the park at Provo. We called it Provo Park. So the problem happened in '69. They cut it out. The Park and Recreational Park of the city, it was Republican controlled. They stopped, no more of this, no more anti-war stuff. So I lived real near there. I lived where Bongo Burgers is, up above. I lived up there. And I sort of saw this space. Why not have a rally up there? So that's how it started. Other people suggested we could get sod out in the valley. The sod was a key factor in the sort of civilizing the land there. The first couple of days, if we hadn't been a sod, it would not have been as successful as it was. So it became a big event. I mean, thousands of people. It was on the radio stations. I mean, overnight, it just, well, on top of this, it's springtime, you can understand, and we're all young. And the key thing, I think, is that we were into free speech. The thing now, just to jump forward now, after all of this 49, 50 years, the issue is the same thing. They want to stop this in the community where you have the right to sort of be against the employers, to be for the emancipation of the working class. That's what I'm somewhat for. And you have a right to get up there and say that. And at Sproul, even with the conditions of the FSM and everything, you had to tell who the speakers were going to be on the steps. What we would do is come in with a phone book and we say, well, all these guys are going to speak. And then so they stop insisting that we tell them what speakers we're going to have. But there was control, just like what they're trying to do now. The reason the chancellor has moved it up to the first target to do is because of what we're doing right here. We're organizing against them. And, you know, I mean, it's a cesspool of military. That's what the university is. Everything is coming from the either Department of Energy or the Department of Defense. All military money is coming in. All the research is almost all military. So the drones, where did they come from? They came from Berkeley. The lab out there at Livermore, that's, you know, the nuclear lab. Everything is military. So basically, they don't want me to get up here and talk about that. Which in the 60s, we were talking about it much more, too, by the way.
Going back to, or going on to today's organizing against what the university is doing, what's happening? What are you guys doing? How can people get involved? Could you give us some clues and tell us what's happening right now, pretty much?
So when the chancellor came down and made the announcement that she was moving on the park, we started having these weekly meetings in which we've been having every Sunday at 1 o'clock. And first time it was 40 people showed up, and now it's on the average about 20 people show up. And now we've actually become friends, a lot of us. I've become a little reliant on it because it's someplace I can see on Sunday at 4 o'clock some people I know and we can talk about things. So what are we doing? Well, I think we're trying to spread the struggle there. We're having a rally at the park in 2 weeks from the day, a concert with speakers. We're having on campus the day before, 2 days before that. We're going to show the film you couldn't show here by newsreel. We're going to show that on campus. We're trying to get students and other people involved. And today we actually decided to spread the struggle a little bit to actually the homeless, since we somewhat, even though all of us are not homeless, but we do sort of, they're the 25 of us or 20 of us, we sort of represent the people that are in the park. It's their living room, basically. The ones that are homeless, that's their living room. It's where they hide out during the day, and they can live like I live in my living room at home. That's their living room. So we're sort of trying to expand on that idea of including more people. And we decided today, even though we're not going to pull it off that easy, to have a mass meeting of all the homeless in the East Bay. There hasn't been a call. I mean, one of the things that we did, we instantly got a meeting going. You know, we knew they were going to vamp on us. The next thing, we got 40 people in a meeting. The problem with a lot of the people that are sort of now in the homeless movement or whatever, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know why they're in the situation. They don't realize that profits are at all-time high now. The economy is just booming. The employers are making their 6 and 7% on their dollar everywhere, and they're just tremendously satisfied. They're not going to have anything that's going to disturb with that. They like us down here being homeless. They like us fighting among ourselves and everything. So we've decided a little bit, and it's your turn next, to... I'm sorry. Can you? I hate microphones. So anyway, I'm sorry. So I'll just move it on to you, Joe.
Well, I wanted to add that in addition to all the plans we're making, the most immediate thing that I think we need to do is to energize whatever our core is going to end up being, so that we can grow. Any people that you know that support the park, that really, you know, have some deep connection, if you could ask them to come to city council meetings, go to planning commission meetings. As you saw, the mayor is suffering under, you know, this deception that the park is going to be a good thing, as the university has laid out these plans, which nobody believes they're really going to follow through on. But as happened in the past, the university makes its move on the park when it sees an administration that it thinks will crumble under its weight. And that's what they've got now. They've got 9 city council people, and only one might, whisper a little dissent from the mayor's plans. So we need to have people come out to council meetings, show up in public, talk to your friends, write letters, do anything you can. And we'll try and make the meetings comfortable for everybody. Older folks, if they want to come out, we'll look for a place that's not sitting on the lawn. But the important thing is to get in touch with us. But even more important than that is to come out. I hope to speak more about. One thing I do want to say, Mike turned me on to this. Before '69, and make no doubt about it, this is the same old lies as in '69. They never took that land because they wanted to build student housing. The regents told them there was no money for student housing. Students weren't living in dorms. They were such oppressive structures. There was no money in the bank. The regents told the Chancellor Haynes at that time they couldn't build within 2 years. They were lucky if they could build anything within 10 years. So that was a fraudulent declaration of necessity, which is one of the things you have to file if you're going to take land from the public. So that was a lie. And they're pulling off the same line now. She's put it on her list as first because it's an old score they've got to settle. The university was wrong about the war. They were wrong about free speech. They were wrong about stopping the African American Studies program. So this is just like Haiti, the only place that had a successful slave revolt. This is on a smaller scale, but just as important to us as citizens of this country fighting for the right to dissent. They're coming back to make sure that we don't get away with something that we did totally revolutionary. So what Mike told me, before '69, there was a color line on Martin Luther King. Black folks were herded down into West Berkeley, West Oakland. It was a sundown town. You crossed Martin Luther King if you were black. Coming up towards the park, you were sent back somehow. The university was complicit in this. They bought McKinley High School, which was a continuation high school just 2 blocks from the park. But continuation high school, you know what that means. These were people of color. The university bought the high school, moved it down to where the adult school or the East Bay campus is now, and that's how they started cleaning up the area. The university made the move on the park because it was a haven of protest, and they were getting worried because the head of the newspaper, the head of the student union, the head of some of the biggest organizations on campus were buying into revolt. And the university thought, we've got to put an end to this. And I'll just take one more thing. The guy that started the film, Paul Sawyer, talking about that meeting in Miami with Nixon and Kissinger, what that was about was Nixon's goal all throughout the war was to destroy the student anti-war movement. And what came out of that meeting in Miami was he picked people to go all across the country and tell Republican governors that they better do something. Agnew came up to talk to Reagan. He had an easy sell. Bob Hope went to another Republican state. Billy Graham went somewhere else. So you know what happened here? Agnew gave the message, take no prisoners. The president wants these students off the street. A year later, one of the Republican governors that got the message was Kent State. 4 people shot to make Nixon feel safe in proceeding with the war, and then later that year, Jackson State. So that's how serious the intent to put down any kind of serious anti-war protest and anti-capitalist protest in the United States was. So go People's Park.
I, and actually, it's a good segue because one of the things that we're trying to counter right now is that the university for years has had a policy of benign neglect for the park. So maintenance doesn't happen, things break, the bathrooms are perpetually broken. And part of that, their neglect, is that they prefer the park to stay quiet. They prefer not a lot of activity in the park. And I personally moved to the neighborhood in 2011. And the park was a very different community in 2011, and it's been very much changed by policing practices that are common to the university and to the Berkeley Police Department. Part of that is the application of stay-away orders. If they do arrest someone in the park, that often comes with an order to stay away from that property for up to 3 years. Sometimes they're even 5 years. You have to be pretty bad for a 5-year stay away. But what that does is it divides the community. So as the community grows together in bonds, the homeless community and the people who visit the park, when you give someone a stay away for what is probably a very minor, maybe selling weed or drinking a beer, you break up that community. We can no longer support each other. The university also has a policy of casting crime in the park as much more serious than it is. The university and the city of Berkeley both use something called crime maps. You can find it online. It's on the city website. And you can just type in an address, and it'll pop up with the local police agencies' arrests for crimes that are in the uniform crime report that the FBI maintains. So for the last 5 months, which is the data I have on the crime map thing, there were 16 arrests in People's Park. And the majority of those were, not surprisingly, drug and alcohol violations. There were a couple of assaults, and theft and larceny, a weapons charge. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the People's Park area, but just up the block is a large complex of UC Berkeley dorms. Now, 16 arrests in People's Park. Guess how many arrests in the complex of dorms just up the street? Any takers? Any guesses? 26 in the same period of time. Now, the thing is that many of there were a number of arrests for thefts and larceny, but not a good sign for the university. The largest proportion of them were actually sex crimes. Now, that makes the dorms, to me, sound like a veritable hotbed of criminal activity, especially as, because, I mean, these are students. These are people who are about to, go forth and join society. And supposedly, they have cast the denizens of People's Park as the dregs of the earth. Yet, surprisingly, somewhat more law-abiding, or at least not caught. Now, I'm not saying that people of People's Park are angels. There's certainly a lot of, there's a term called the dark figure of crime that criminal justice people use, and that is unreported crime. And there is certainly a large dark figure of crime in People's Park, but it's largely, frankly, recreational weed sales, and we do have a problem, a sad and increasing problem with methamphetamines, but that's not something that the police will help us with. They seem to actually be more tolerant, oddly, of the methamphetamine sellers than they are of the weed. It's very odd to me, you would think, but this is also a problem that we have. So one of the things that we have to face is turning around this narrative. And the more people who look like citizens who will come to the park and sit down and have a picnic or bring your kids, those people, each and every one of them, will help us save People's Park.
Cool. So let's open it up for questions and comments. Let's try to keep the comments for less than 2 minutes. If you do have a question or comment, raise your hand, and I will come to you with the microphone so everybody can hear you.
How close is the university to implementing their housing plans for People's Park? I haven't been catching up as much.
They haven't even got the regents' consent on this. I mean, they have to go through the regents to make this all happen. They're talking that it would start, maybe they would come in and take it 2020. The time that Trump is going to be elected, that's when they're talking about taking the park back from us. So they don't, I mean, the way I see these things sort of, I mean, how many times have we been through when they're going to take the park, they announce it, they get the sheriff out there, everything, and then they have sort of second thoughts about it. And that is, I think that's sort of what's happening right now, is they talk about October, they end in October, but it's not a real positive time that they're going to negotiate with this contractor that's going to do all the sites, all 9 sites.
That's something that they've decided with all 9 sites, that they would have a single contractor for the entire project. Well, that's enormous. And the search is apparently nationwide. And again, the last we heard, the end of October was going to be when they found this person.
I feel they still have to run it through the regions.
Yeah, and if you know anything about developer finances, you can read right through this. It's as thin as tissue paper. Giving one developer 9 sites with the stipulation that he or she builds on People's Park first. Well, you know, that's like a gold mine, as long as you can fight off the legal costs and the police costs that will be associated with any kind of move on People's Park, which will make those dormitories anything but affordable once you factor in all of the money that's going to go into the fight for People's Park. So he gets the other 8 after he goes through that hell. It's clearly just a way to get somebody to take on the dirty work of dealing with us and you.
And they also, that's not even covering the carrot of the supportive housing for the homeless. They plan on bidding that out to an affordable housing contractor separately from any construction by the university. So that makes it even more of a pie in the sky, ain't never gonna see it kind of thing.
Oh, so thank you for speaking. What are the 9 sites, and who is this contractor?
Well, they haven't.
There's no name for the contractor.
I guess it's one that has done it across the country. It's across the country. One of the big sites where they're saying 2,000 units is right there on what is that? Oxford, past Hearst as you go north. That farmland, it used to have farm growing there and things like that.
That was the
That is-
GMO development site, wasn't it?
Pardon?
That was a GMO development site, wasn't it? Where they,
The Oxford Tract.
Oxford Tract.
yeah, that place.
So, and there's other sites like that they pinpointed that of land they own that they want to build on.
Questions, comments?
There's one in the back. Eric, Gerald.
Actually, we see that at its height, the struggle for People's Park became a mass issue that thousands of people were involved with, and that is the missing ingredient today. But they do have some weaknesses that we should harp upon. One, the thing you're just talking about, but also, you know, the 1% is not totally rational. They get kind of crotchety, and they got their own little vendettas. For instance, even though the Black Panther Party, we closed our doors in 1979, we were no longer an organization, they continued the vendetta against the Black Panther Party after the Black Panther Party no longer existed. Examples being the San Francisco Eight, for instance. These older gentlemen that they all busted over some stuff that happened 20 years prior. Mumi Abdul-Jamal. What's the guy that wrote Rap Brown? You know, Jameen Amil. These are former Panthers that were arrested way after the Panther Party itself no longer existed. And that's a part of that vendetta. They do have a bit of a vendetta against People's Park. They don't like the fact that they got beat down decisively by the people. And for that reason, it is quite possible to build a constituency of support because there is no rational reason for it. All of what you said demonstrates that they're probably, you know, they're forcing the issue. And in so doing, I think people can see through some of this, at least. And I think the important issue of public land and parks needs to be pushed forward. Because if indeed People's Park is just, let's just say they pour concrete over the whole thing, where's the nearest park? Would that be Willard? Willard, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? So that's, I mean, there's a need for open space, too, for the working people. Finish.
Also, I happened across this the other day. If you look at a map of the parks in Berkeley, you will notice that there are literally twice as many parks on the north side of town as there are on the south side of town. And they're nicer over there, too. But with the removal of People's Park, we might actually take the city under its fair land use policy that it established in the mid-'70s, which is something we need to look into also.
Just want to say that People's Park is known all over the world. People should tell the mayor, what are you going to brag about your city? You know, a university that builds bombs? Everybody knows Berkeley is People's Park. It's a unique cultural spot, and he should fight for its preservation, if not nothing else for that.
And sort of researching a little bit, you know, when we lose a struggle, it takes a long time to recuperate. If you look at just the class as a whole, the last time we really had a major struggle, which we lost, was in the 80s. That's 33 years ago. This is the first year that we're sort of picking up a little something on our side. To lose the park would be a disastrous thing for the movement. And I think that's actually probably the best argument that we've got is you're going to all lose if we lose the park. And it won't just stop there. Okay, just continuing on that. If you go down Telegraph Avenue, you'll see that the Cafe Mediterranean now is all boarded up and is being remodeled. Well, that's part of this thing of eliminating what took place in the past. The Med was the center of the anti-war movement because it was almost the only coffee house in Berkeley at the time. And all of the people that I met, Bardakey, Jack Weinberg, all of them, Savio, that was a coffee house that everybody went to. Plus, why that area is so whatever it is, it had the only bakery before the loaf, the bread was sliced up in the grocery store. That was the bakery that everybody bought their bread. Come down there on Sunday, have a coffee, a Claire or some kind of thing. That was a hangout of the whole university, the professors, everything else. And so what happened that as time went on, the offspring of people, the professors and the academic community that lived around there, they started hanging out in Telegraph Avenue. And that is sort of what we saw there in '68. And before that, we had things going on too. But it was a center where people lived around the bakery, at Claire's Bakery.
I was going to say this might be a time to highlight further the elitist nature of the Board of Regents and how they're not elected and there's no reform there, and they tend to not really, they're looking out for the 1%, not everybody else.
Yeah, I went over the Board of Regents members last night. They're certainly not what you would expect from the days when it was, Chrysler and Lockheed. But there's a lot of big media people. There's a guy that heads the David Geffen Company, and a guy that builds $1 million hotels. His wife is on the Regents, builds big hotels in Beverly Hills. If anybody has any dirt on them, we'd love to hear it. But nothing jumped out at me. They even have a couple of people that seem to do halfway decent nonprofit work.
In talking about the Regents, I talked to a few people in which I was involved too in the anti-apartheid movement. And if you remember, we tried to concentrate on getting the Regents to sort of change their mind. But the reality, we really didn't go to the Regents and present that to them. We worked on the outside with the students to try and influence the Regents. Now it's a little bit more difficult to work with the students. I think that we should concentrate on the Regents. There's 20 of them or whatever, 12, 20 or whatever it is.
No, more than 12.
Really? 20. Let's say there's 20 of them. It's 20 versus 52,000 or 42,000 students. I think we only have to get a few of them to bring up, let's take like the governor. The governor, what's his name? Kevin, or Nevin? Devin?
Jerry Brown.
No, the governor we're going to have. The governor we're going to have. Newsom. Well, we'll take Newsom. I mean, Newsom is weak when it comes to these type of things. We can probably I think the question, if you ever get a chance, if he comes to town here, are you going to call the National Guard on People's Park when it comes down? And I think that's the best question you can ask him. Is he going to call out the National Guard and do the same thing they did 50 years ago?
Could you describe what the university wants to do with the park?
They say they want to build dorms. Around the Bowditch part, that would be the east part, the layout that I've seen, it's a 7-story, 1,000 students sort of building they want to build in a U shape there. And by the way, everybody that in our meeting and everything, it's the density thing that everybody's really into. I mean, right now it's so crowded, it's like Disneyland. All the new students, they got, I think it's 8,400 new students this year. So everybody and they're going to add another right in that one area. And then plus there's another building right down a half a block away it has 154 units that's going to become active if it doesn't get burnt down. And they basically, I think, Gerald's hit it right on. They want to get rid of us. That's what it's all about. It has nothing to do with housing for the students.
Just leave it? Okay. So I guess I'm still confused about who owns the land. So if the university owns the land, then what's the role of the city in all of this? Or what's the strategy for the city in all of this?
Well, the city right now, the situation is they're getting free services from the university. It's costing them not a dime. They're just crazy. The mayor is crazy. He says, I want to get back to normal. It's going to cost him hundreds, thousands of dollars to offer all the services that now the university is offering. By the way, since they started the activation of wanting to take a park, they hired a welfare worker that now is trying to take away our base. In other words, get rid of all the people who are there. But he's really doing well. It's what the university should have done for the other 48 years, was give us help and helping out the people that are in need. So like he supplies all kinds of items to the people there, supplies sleeping bags, tents. So he's one of the well-liked guys from the university there at the present. Really nice guy, too. But the point, I guess, what they're trying to do is take away our base by him being there.
Yeah, the university and the city, the chancellor, in her first letter when she announced that she was going after the park as the first site they were going to build on, made her sort of theme was town and gown, that the university and the city have such a sparkling, wonderful love relationship. Well, the city has actually, in all other times, has always been complaining that the university doesn't pay their share at all. They don't pay their share of sewer. They don't pay their share of police. They don't pay. Yeah, they don't pay any tax. And when they want to build something, nobody gets to say whether they like it or not. The university doesn't have to go through any of the normal plan checks or reviews that other building projects have to go through. So that's one way that the city is sort of fronting for and paying for the university's pleasure at running this corporate enterprise. The other thing is that the university had a contract not to admit any more than, like, I think 1,000 or 1,500 students, and they broke it. This last year is, I think, over 7,000 students, and now they're using that, and of course Jesse Arrigan has bought into it, that there's this, the password now in all the cities all over the country is affordable housing. And Jesse's bought into it. Wow, affordable housing, we can do something to give more affordable housing, student affordable housing. It's total BS. And we should tell Jesse that the homes that were on that lot were taken, fraudulently using eminent domain, and the city ought to use eminent domain, reverse eminent domain, to take them back, because now we have a real purpose for that lot, and that's to provide real freedom for people that have no other place to sit down and have a meal or just smoke a joint. This is the homeless people's living room, and we should use it more so that we can say we have even more reason for taking it back. But that's one thing that we could throw in his face.
And also, during the campaign, the mayor came out very specifically against any kind of housing being built on People's Park. So, and that was, only 2 years ago, and did a complete 180 after the chancellor brought up this plan to include the supportive housing. That apparently just made them all roll over and offer their bellies for scratches. It was just amazing.
In Berkeley, it is sort of an unusual thing. We have a chancellor that's like a king in a way, or a queen in this particular case. She makes decisions very undemocratically, doesn't ask. There's no board that's from the community. It's all from the university. It's really a company town, a very, very large company within Berkeley. And whenever she says, or whatever the chancellors have done in the past, That is sort of the way it goes in the town.
But make no mistake, after Bloody Thursday, when Haynes took a look at what had happened, because he called in the Alameda County Sheriff's Department and sort of had some regrets at all the bloodshed and the person that died, someone asked him whether he would have done it differently, and he said, make no mistake, I'm just a janitor for the Regents.
I
That's the daughter. She wants me to come home. I'm a caregiver. Yeah, sir.
I just wanted to thank you guys for hosting this event. My dad, who's no longer around, was part of People's Park and there the first day, and then also part of the ensuing riots and street actions. So it's like very important to me. And just thinking about how, like, really what a travesty the loss of Cafe Med was, and how it seems that Berkeley is really just like sleeping on the destruction of its most historical landmarks, and that the destruction of People's Park would be just like a tremendous loss. And I'm wondering if, so I think in the past couple of days, the developer that was repeatedly applying to develop the Spangers parking lot using Scott Wiener's SB 35, which is the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program, that was just rejected because as many of you know, that's actually also a shell mound, the Spangers parking lot. And despite SB 35 passing, it was ruled that a city has a right to identify important cultural and historical sites. So the Spangers parking lot, which is actually an Ohlone shell mound, being one. So I'm just wondering if there could be some way to kind of continue the momentum of that victory, because I know so much of the conversation right now has been hijacked by like YIMBYs and pro-develop, like build at all costs, build housing at all costs. But to take a step back from that and say that, like, these are our historical sites and they need to be protected. Yeah.
That's one of the aspects of the struggle that I've been working on. People's Park was landmarked by the city of Berkeley in 1984. And if you get the file, you can read all sorts of great praise for the historic importance of People's Park as a local landmark. The next step is to apply with the State Office of Historical Preservation for a place on the National Register. And I'm working on it. It's not an easy application. It's chock full of all kinds of bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo. One of the problems we have is I talked to one of the state historians, and he said he was familiar with the site, and he actually thought it had very, very important historical context, but the historical integrity of the site was a question, because the National Guard came in and bulldozed it. So what's left? The park actually only existed from the 20th of April till the 15th of May. So I'm working on, what they call, end runs, and maybe trying to consider the park as a battlefield for free speech. The park was the original park, the bulldozed park, and the park as it exists today. But I need somebody that, is really good at this stuff. And I've got some people that are going to help me, and we'll see how it goes.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay, right there. Just a second.
I just want to point out we have a table here We have events happening. September 23rd, come on out. Or at noon is going to be a foot washing. Some of the went off. Okay. Songbirds, TVB, who are the missionaries, which is students came up, and not Bozo the Clown, but Lefty the Clown will be the MC. And we'll have Yukon Hannibal, who's been a long Black Panther park activist, will start things off. So, at 5 o'clock we're supposed to shut things down, but people will probably continue to party afterwards, but we can't have electric. So I'm just inviting you, come on down. We'll have another thing on October 20th because we want to use that stage. And of course we'll have, that's another way, as we get people there and we have speakers, we can educate people. Thanks.
Yeah, check out this table. There's a lot of literature. There's also books from the Terry Compost wrote about the park. So check it out. There's a lot of pictures. There's a history of People's Park now and what happened in the past. Is there any more questions or comments? Well, thank you all for coming. Again, the meetings for People's Park are at 1 o'clock, right? In People's Park, part of the committee, so look for them. Every Sunday, 1 p.m. in People's Park.